Round 2 questions now. All right, this is the specifics for your project. So these are the questions that go more along the lines of what you want. And these are the questions that the GC is going to want to know. What's the availability of their staff, to do a project around a certain schedule? They want to know the time frame for the project, and this is where you should ask them, hey, I'm thinking of starting, say, in April, around spring, and I would really like to finish, say, before July 4th. But I'd like to finish way before that in order to be ready to have a grand opening party for July 4th. And be prepared to say, well, if that doesn't fit the time frame, and I don't have a July 4th party like I do, say, every year in the new space, maybe you have an end of summer party instead, where it's becoming, the middle of August, that kind of thing. So work on the time frame for the project that you're thinking about. Payment schedule, that's one of the things that you're going to want to ask is how much will you want up front, and do you want to be paid all except, say, the last 10% or so? What's a good payment schedule to you? And that will let the general contractor know that you're also thinking about how to pay for these things and how it's going to be funded. That's probably one of the most important things to the general contractor. How am I going to get paid and when? Now they're going to be shuffling some cash around in order to make sure that they can pay their own bills, pay their workers, but also pay for materials and all the other complexities that go into a project. Something new hits, you might want to talk about how that payment schedule can be altered too. Additionally, just lay it all out for them. If you have an email or you're calling them up and talking to them, let them know that, hey, every 2 weeks I want to pay you a certain percentage of the project based on what the project completion is, and they'll be totally fine with that. If there's a slip of schedule, talk about how that slip of schedule may mean that the payment schedule may shift as well. They're going to be more open for that, but the more predictable you are about the payment and the time frame of the project, the better it's going to be for them, and therefore the better it can be for you. Ask them what subcontractors are going to be used. As mentioned earlier, they might bring in a bunch of subcontractors for certain aspects, but you might be thinking, well, they're going to bring in a mechanical subcontractor for this, a plumbing subcontractor for that. But did you know that they might bring in, say, a fire protection subcontractor, or that they might bring in a structural subcontractor to at least do a few things on your project? Ask so that it doesn't become a surprise to you when there's a different crew showing up to a project or different personnel kind of going in and out. And then let them know what your budget concerns are. You can tell them your budget that you have for this project, and the contractors generally are going to say, well, that's what you have budgeted. But in their experience, sometimes that can be a soft ceiling. Tell them what your hard ceiling is. Tell them that absolutely you can't have it go over a certain amount. Tell them that you absolutely can't have a certain amount, and you really want to get it within that budget. If you're not within that budget, perhaps they don't get a schedule, or they can shift on personnel, those kinds of things. And that's where you'll work through it as you talk through the design process as well. But to let them know what your budget concerns are, whether the payment schedule goes along with that or not. But between the budget and the schedule, with the time frame of the project, it'll let them know about their availability, and it may answer a lot of questions for them. If you're expecting too much for a small budget, they might say that they're not the contractor for you. And not only that, they realize that it's going to be a pretty tight budget, and they don't want to be squeezed like that. They would rather have more budget to work with and get the project correct, instead of trying to squeeze all the extras into a budget that's pretty constricting. And you might hear about dollars per square foot, those kinds of things. Contractors don't necessarily like those metrics because it can be restricting. And once they go through a project, I know that a lot of evaluators and bankers and so on will look at that value per square footage, and that's how they're going to give, say, a loan and such. But the contractor wants to know that, yes, we're doing this particular project for, say, $100,000, but the owner really has the ceiling of $150,000 That doesn't mean they're going to go out and nickel and dime you until they get to 150. What that means is if there's a major shift or major change, they can answer that and make sure that the project will be completed. And tell them all of that as well. Now you might say that, well, that's kind of revealing my scheme, my plan, and it's telling them too much. That can be, bad advice to a lot of people. Well, what I'm saying, this is good advice because the contractor knows that you want to only spend $100,000. Every dollar that goes over $100,000 is going to be scrutinized. And that's where you're going to be really in their face about every design choice that shifts from there. And tell them all of these things so that if you're absolutely honest with that general contractor, a lot of people will say, well, that general contractor knows how to take advantage of you then. No, that general contractor, an honest one that you can trust and depend on, and even the dishonest ones are going to say, well, okay, this guy seems to be a straight shooter. I will also want to be a straight shooter as well. I want to be as honest about things that are going on, and tell them that as well. Tell them everything that you're asking for, and tell them what you expect from them as well. They might say that $100,000 is too restrictive on the budget, but you're asking them to provide that service anyway. And they might say, well, maybe this contract isn't for me. But they might say, well, this contract is pretty restrictive to $100,000, but I'm going to take it anyway because I realize that there's an extra $50,000 budget that I can also use up or justify once I get the project. That's also a risk that you're taking, but the idea is that you should expect the contractor to say, okay, all of these items you didn't include in your particular list when you first got this project, and they might try to have change orders and other items that are going to cost more items or cost more to this project for items that you hadn't expected. That can be justified, but don't accept it necessarily as not being part of the original contract, especially if you have an architect along the way. That architect might say, well, this contractor installed the lights incorrectly and they want more money to go back and install it correctly because the light fixtures are, say, a little bit odd, or the mounting brackets are a little bit odd. Too bad. You can fight that and say, this is what you originally asked, that you were originally doing. You had the light fixtures, they were installed incorrectly, go back and fix them for free. And those items are some of the items about managing a general contractor that you can get into. But if you're honest about your budget and your time frame, those are the things that are going to attract a general contractor and hopefully get you a better estimate price whenever you're talking with them, because you're easier to work with. They know exactly the parameters. There's no smoke and mirrors between the two of you, and you don't have to worry about telling them. They already know what the budget is. They already know what the restrictions are on the schedule and those budgets.